Here in Studio One, I'm looking at a pretty typical vocal in the sense that it's very dynamic. What do I mean by that? Some parts are pretty quiet and other parts get pretty loud, like the spikes that we can see here. Now, that's just the nature of a vocal. However, when we put this in the mix, we will sometimes feel that some parts of the vocal are poking out too loud, and when we adjust that volume down to account for that, then other parts will be too quiet. So we really want to kind of even it out, so that we can more easily keep the vocal on top of the music. Now, there's different ways to think about volume of vocals or anything else in our mix. One of the methods would be volume automation, or fader automation. Now, that would be useful for broad sweeps. For example, if you wanted to make a whole chorus louder than the verses, then volume automation would be great for that. But it's too broad when we're taking care of spikes like this. Another thing you may consider is gain envelopes or gain automation. Now, we do that in Studio One by right-clicking on our clip and then turning on the gain envelope here. Now, I'll just press escape to get rid of that dialogue. Now, I may look at a phrase like this last one here and visually even see that it's way more quiet than the rest of the other phrases. So I could highlight that phrase like so, and then hover over the top half of that selection. We can see that horizontal cursor there, and then just drag up, and I can make that part louder. And that would certainly kind of even out that phrase in comparison to the other phrases, and you definitely may want to do that. However, it still doesn't take care of the other issue we get. Let's turn off the gain envelope here, and that issue is these kind of spikes and then these other really quiet parts. For that, you may want to use compression. Now, you could just use an inline compressor and as an insert on your track. Now, that can be quite tricky to get right, but you may still want to do it. But before you do that, you may want to use a much easier method of compression, which I'm going to talk about now. Hi folks, I'm Mike, and I hope you're well. Parallel compression is a really great method to help you keep things like vocals on top of the mix. The great news about it is, even if you're a complete beginner to music production, it's pretty easy to set up. And also, even if you don't really understand compression that much, the settings are pretty straightforward. So I think everybody is capable of using this, and it's very, very effective. Now, there's actually several different ways you could implement it in Studio One. I'm going to show you the kind of original method, if you like, simply because I think this gives you a better understanding of what's really going on. Let's dive in and sort out the dynamics of this vocal. Let's just have a quick listen to the first couple of phrases of this vocal so we've got a bit of context.
When you need to weep, I'll be your tear. When you're feeling cold, I'll hold you near.
So there's some parts of this which kind of tail off a little bit and get a little bit lost. There's a couple of parts which just sort of spike and poke out a little bit too much. We're going to even that out. Before we dive in and do it, I just want to change a setting here in my mixer, just to make sure that any buses I create are going to appear next to the track that I'm working on. I wouldn't normally do this. Normally I like all of my buses to be over on the right hand side, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to do this. So I'm just going to click on this spanner icon here on the left hand side and just make sure I uncheck keep bus channels to the right. Click on that. And also I'm just going to do the same for VCAs just below there, because I may talk about VCAs a little bit later on. I'll press escape to get rid of that. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is create a bus. I'm going to do a send from this vocal to a bus. So I'm just going to click on the little plus control here like so, click on that, and then click on add bus channel. Okay, so you can see the send here, and then you can see the bus next to it. Let's rename that bus to we'll call it Vox Comp, so we know it's for vocal compression. Now, you'll notice that the send here is blue. Okay, that indicates in Studio One that this is a post fader send. What that means is the signal, or the level of the signal sent from here to the bus, will be affected by the fader level. It will get more quiet as we use the fader. It will get louder as we turn it up We don't want that. I'll talk about why later. We want a pre-fade ascend. So we're going to click on this tiny little icon here, and that's going to turn yellow, indicating that it's a pre-fade ascend. So we've got that signal going through to the bus, and then we're going to add a compressor. So I'll go to inserts at the top. I'll click on the little plus icon here. Now I'm going to add a compressor which is in the fat channel, which this comes with Studio One. So I'll click on that, and then I'm going to change the compressor here. Yeah, we've got the default compressor here. Click on this arrow here, and I'm going to choose the FET compressor. Why am I doing this? Well, after lots of experimentation and doing this so many times on vocals, I generally find I get a better result with a compressor like this, and with this one in particular, rather than using the stock compressor which comes with Studio One, or indeed the default compressor in Fat Channel XT here. Okay, so that's why I'm going for that. Now, most importantly, one of the aspects that this compressor, or one of the features this compressor has, is a really high ratio. It's got a 20:1 ratio we can use here. So I will switch over to 20:1 as the ratio here. And another thing that we need to do is have a really fast attack. In fact, as fast as possible. So with the attack control here, I'm going to turn it all the way up to maximum. Now note that I'm turning it all the way up. On some other compressors, a fast attack would be all the way down, yeah, because you'd be sort of setting a very short attack. So it would go from short to long. But on other compressors like this one, it's thinking about it in a different way. It's thinking about it in terms of speed. So slow to fast. We want a fast attack, so we've got it all the way up to the maximum. The same applies with release. I would start off by setting the release to as fast as possible. However, just in this case, I'm just going to nudge it down from that just a tad. I've already experimented with my settings for this particular vocal track, and I found that just easing that release off a little bit was working a bit better for me. But I would start off with a really, really fast release. Okay, so we're basically set up. We need to switch it on, of course, which I'll do now. Now, as I play this, we're going to notice something really important. Let's do that now.
When you need to weep, I'll be your tear.
What you may have noticed is nothing's happening. There's no compression. There's no needle movement here at all. And that's because we haven't got this up to reach the threshold yet. Now, other compressors that you may see will have a threshold control. This one doesn't. This, like some other compressors, works in a different way. The threshold is fixed internally, and you need to bring the level of the source material up to that threshold and meet it. So that's what we use this control for. This is the input control. Now, because this is going to make things much louder as I turn this up, I'm actually going to turn the output volume down, okay, just to anything to make it a lot quieter. We're not too interested so much in how it's exactly sounding at the moment. We just want to make sure that we're getting plenty of compression. Now, I'm going to turn this up until I see this needle move, not just a little bit, but a lot. Okay, so I'll turn it up a bit and see where we're at.
When you need to weep, I'll be your tear. When you're feeling cold, I'll hold you near.
Okay, it's too quiet for you to really hear anything at the moment, but you saw a lot of compression happening here. If you're new to compression, often with compressors, we may be doing, a sort of volume reduction of 3 or 4 decibels or something along those lines. 20 is a lot, especially when you've got a ratio set high like this, 20:1. It's almost acting close to a kind of a limiter, really. It's hardly letting anything over the threshold, and it's really clamping down to sort of flatten out this particular track. Now, we do need to make it a little bit louder than this, so I'll go ahead and adjust the output volume. What I'm actually going to do is now solo this track, so we're only hearing the track by itself, and it's going to sound pretty awful, I have to warn you, but parallel compression always sounds awful until you adjust it correctly. Let's have a look and see.
When you need to weep, I'll be your tear.
Have a listen to this.
When you're feeling cold, I'll hold you near.
Just kind of flattening the whole thing out, yeah. There's no real dynamics in there anymore. For some styles of music, I guess you may want compression like this, but not for this style of music. We want it to sound much more natural. So this is where the final stage of parallel compression comes in. What we do now is turn the fader down on this bus. Yeah, I'll turn solo off, and then blend this highly compressed signal in with the original. Let's have a listen now and see how we go.
When you need to weep, I'll be your tear. When you're feeling cold, I'll hold you near.
So it's really helped a lot there. I don't know if you can hear that, but what it's doing really is with the original vocal, yeah, we're getting all of the nice dynamics. You want things to be a bit up and down. You don't want it to be too flat normally. There's no do's and don'ts really. Should say I don't want it to be too flat. I want it to be reasonably dynamic. However, having this compression on here means that we can turn up those quieter parts that are getting lost using this bus, but we're not turning up the louder parts because they've been compressed so much. Okay, so this enables you to kind of boost those quiet parts and make sure you keep that vocal on top even in the quieter passages. Okay, and this is the basic principle of parallel compression. Of course, like anything else, it's going to have slightly different settings on your particular track. Just blend that in until it sounds right to you. And you should find that your vocal will now stay on top of the mix much, much better. Now, that's not to say that you wouldn't use regular compression on the track as well. You may if it needs it. Okay. Now, finally, I just want to touch upon a problem that I sort of felt happened earlier where we're using this pre-fader send, yeah, going to this bus. The sort of slight problem that you will have with this is if you ever sort of really turn this fader down, like so on the main vocal, of course, that compressed vocal is still going to be just as loud. Let's have a listen.
When you need to weep, I'll be your tear.
Even though I've got it fairly low here.
When you're feeling cold, I'll hold you near.
You see, it's not making much difference to the volume because this fader is still up here, and we kind of wanted that. So what I would suggest is when you're using sort of buses with things like this, and you may even, you know, do the same as I'm about to do with effects buses like reverb, is then sort of sum them all together. So what I would do here is grab this first track, just close this down, grab this first track, hold control and select the second track here, yeah, and then right click and then go to add bus for selected channels. Yeah, that's created a new bus there. We'll just call that vocals. Yeah, and that has both the original vocal and the parallel compressed vocal now summed together, and I can just adjust the volume here. Yeah.
When you need, I'll be your tear.
Yep. Now that's one way you could do it. I'll undo that. You could also use a VCA for this. So the same again, I'll select both tracks and I will go to add VCA for selected channels. Do that, same difference, apart from the fact with the VCA, we can't actually apply any effects, etc. in the VCA. This is now just a volume control for both of these faders, yeah? And you can see that they maintain their relationship. Now, if you're new to compression, you may want to click on this thumbnail here. This is where I explain how to use the stock compressor, which comes with Studio One. And in that video, I do explain the core concept of compression so that you can understand what all of the controls actually do. Go ahead, click on that one now.